Leading people is hard. People are complex. Leadership would be easy if it wasn't for the people. People don't leave companies, they leave leaders. We know all the cliche statements. And the reality is, I've always desired to be a level 5 leader. I aspire to be that, right? I aspire to give credit out when there's organizational success and look in the mirror for fault first when there's failure. And I'm like, you know what? I want to go impact leaders across industry. It doesn't matter. Nonprofits, for profit, anytime you teach or you train or you coach, if you are open to it, you often are the one that's more impacted than the people you're coaching and training and teaching.
In a corporate world where all employees have great leaders with no egos that create fun cultures where people can do their best work, the employees and companies thrive while doing great things for the customers, themselves, and each other.
Well, we know that rarely happens. I'm Jeff Palacio. I have been a leader for over 40 years for every t-shirt size company, from small 16 employees to extra large over 1 million. Please join me while I interview outstanding leaders that will share stories of great leadership and not so great. It will help you become a better leader while poking fun at all the crazy shit that happens in corporate America.
Hi, I'm Joe Deshawn, and welcome to the Corporate Couch with Jeff Palacio. Today, Jeff is interviewing Scott Willingham. Scott is the CEO and founder of Wake Effect, a human capital management and consulting company. Prior to launching Wake Effect, he was the CRO for Bulb Digital Portfolios, an EdTech startup company based in Lafayette, Colorado. Scott was also executive vice president and partner at MindWire, a predictive index firm. He also served in several other capacities in business, including serving as the chaplain for the University of Missouri Tiger football team. You can learn more about Scott at wakeeffect.co. Let's listen as Jeff talks to Scott.
Scott, welcome to the Corporate Couch today.
Hey, thanks, Jeff. It's an honor to be here with you.
Yeah, no, it's very fun. We met, not sure, besides Sly James, which puts you in great company, the former mayor of Kansas City, you and I met via the internet, via LinkedIn. So you you sent me a LinkedIn connection request, and
I saw you. I saw you on there with Justin Rickliffs and Corey Shear, and so
yeah,
I'm like, and saw your podcast and listened to some of your episodes. Thought I need to connect with Jeff.
This is great. You have a great career journey, and I know you just started your own company, and we'll get into that. But let's start with the fun questions. The NCAA men's basketball tournament, the selection committee finished the brackets on Sunday. We're recording here the Tuesday afterwards. Who do you have winning in your brackets, or at least most of them? Because most people fill out more than one.
That's right. Yeah, we got family, bracketology and stuff groups going on. So this is on the fly because I actually have to get mine done. This is Tuesday. We have till Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern or whatever the first game is. So I'm a little behind. I will tell you, grew up in Texas, but I typically in these things or any kind of betting on Super Bowl or whatever, try to go with head and not heart. And so I went to grad school at Gonzaga and got to watch them painfully win the Final Four game and then lose the national championship to North Carolina in Phoenix when I lived there 4 or 5 years ago. So I'm a big Gonzaga fan, but I'm not going to put them going very far this year. They don't have the team that they've had in the past. So I'm going to go with Houston with my Texas roots. I'm going to go with Houston winning the tournament, though I do like UConn. So maybe – I don't know if they're on opposite sides and will meet in the championship or Final Four, but UConn, Houston, I kind of favor both of those teams.
I like that. A guest I interviewed yesterday has Auburn. He's a Missouri fan, which you also have ties to. But Mizzou had a not so good basketball seasons, but he since they went to the SEC many moons ago, he likes Auburn basketball and has them winning it all. So there you go.
Wow.
Well, Scott, growing up in Texas, what was fun for you? What did you love doing?
Yeah. So you grew up in Texas near Fort Worth in a small town. And, it's Texas high school football was, you grow up watching that and seeing these older kids play, and the whole town comes out to the stadium.
Friday Night Lights. Right?
That's right. Friday Night Lights. So I grew up in that and got to participate in that. Really interesting though. I mean, I grew up in a small town, but had no, people assume Texas, it's guns and horses and cows and ranches and all that. And the small town I grew up in was actually my high school is where J.R. Ewing, Larry Hagman, that played J.R. Ewing in the show Dallas. He graduated from my high school with my aunt.
Oh, wow.
And so,
don't forget I Dream of Jeannie too.
That's exactly. And don't forget I Dream of Jeannie. So Texas roots for sure, but went to college in New Mexico, and my father and future father-in-law, but the girl I was dating is now my wife. Her dad owned a ranch, big ranch, 26,000 acres in New Mexico. And so I got thrust into, he saw me coming, and I did shot and discus in college. And so I was pretty strong, could lift a lot of things. It's one of my few gifts is being able to lift heavy things. And so he saw me coming. He's like, I'm putting this guy to work and see if he'll, make it through the dating and,
Right.
if he sticks around. So I'd stroll out with these cowboys literally at roundups, all horseback, mountains, and you're rounding up cows over 26,000 acres. And I'd stroll out in my Gerbeau jeans and Tommy Hilfiger shirts. And
oh, wow.
They were just looking at me like, what planet? And then they'd find out I'm from near Fort Worth, Texas. And they just like, we can't believe it because there's nothing about you that's cowboy. And then they'd rope the calves and I'd have to go flank them. I'd have to go pick them up like, doing a power clean in the weight room, 400-pound calf, and drop it so it'd get branded and get its vaccinations and all this stuff.
Wow.
And their eyes would get big around going, oh, well, we don't care what kind of jeans he's wearing or what kind of shirt he has on. This guy can help us. So anyway.
Wow. What was the craziest thing that happened while you did that work to make sure your future father-in-law gave you this seal of approval? Exactly.
Gave me his daughter. Well, a couple of things. One is that sometimes these cows, these calves, but they would miss them on this 26,000 acre ranch. And there were mountains and volcanoes and just rough terrain. So they would miss them in the fall, and then they'd have to hit them in the spring, and they'd be 400, 450 pounds, and you're having to work them. And so again, I could get them on the ground, but then I'd have to put all of my weight on their neck so that they could vaccinate them and brand them and all that. And a couple of times, some of them were like, no, you aren't. And they stood, like they got up and started trying to get after me because they were like, you're nothing. Like, we're much stronger than you are, and we're not going to lay down for you. So that was one. The other one was I'd have to get on horseback at times and go help the cowboys. And I, again, had no experience riding horses.
Oh, man.
The horses would puff themselves up. It's almost like they would know you're a city slicker or whatever. And like, okay, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. So they'd blow out their chest and puff up themselves, and you'd start riding them, and they'd let that air out as you're riding them, and your saddle would get loose. And I'm riding off through like, this volcano area.
Oh my God.
And I start going sideways on this horse because the saddle gets loose. And I bite it into a cactus. I fall off and eat it. So,
oh, geez,
some great experiences for sure.
Yeah. Any aspirations as a child to what you wanted to do when you became an adult?
Yeah, Jeff, this one might surprise you. I'm really proud of it. I grew up somehow fascinated by maps and weather. I would watch the weather on the local Dallas news every night after school. And I wanted to be a meteorologist, wanted to be a weatherman, wanted to be Willard Scott on NBC.
Sure.
Or Al Roker. Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't end up happening, but that's what I, as a little kid, wanted to be.
Wow. I love it. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
So you go to New Mexico State. Obviously, you were the field part of the track and field team with the shot and the discus. You graduated with a BS in city and regional planning. Was that your original major? And why that major?
Yeah, again, love maps, map making, studying cities, loved how cities are built, highway systems. Yeah, kind of a weird thing. I would study cities and be really interested in population growth of cities, how cities could sustain, the kind of growth that they have to endure and plan for. And so I saw that major and I was like, it's kind of interesting. Did a county internship in planning department. And that was enough for me to realize I really wasn't probably made for politics, and decided maybe not to go that route after college. But yeah, city planning and even, some geography classes, map making, cartography, remote
Wow.
sensing, satellite imagery, all that kind of stuff that goes with it.
Yeah, at some point I'm going to have a traffic engineer on my show because I always wonder about traffic jams when there's like
Yeah.
nothing really happening, but the traffic's backed up. But that's for another podcast. So your first job once you graduated from University of New Mexico, what was your first job and how did you get it?
Yeah. So first job was actually started a master's in education and taught school. So there was a school district about halfway between Las Cruces and the Mexico border that just couldn't find teachers. They couldn't get the staff needed. So if you had a college degree and you would start your master's in education at the same time concurrently, then you teach school. So I actually went and taught school to probably 60% ESL students and eighth grade history, and coached football and track at the high school.
Oh, wow.
And taught at the middle school. So I
Oh,
did
wow.
that for 1 year. After college, my wife was married, had to pay bills, had to have an apartment and pay rent. So she had 1 year left in her studies. So
Interesting. So did they hand you the subject of history or did you pick that?
I picked it sort of. I mean, math was always my favorite subject, but loved history as well. If it would have been English, probably, or literature or science, it might not have worked very well. So loved American history, and so that's what I chose.
Yeah, so then you migrate. It sounds like you go to Athletes in Action and
Yep.
become the University of Missouri football
Yeah.
chaplain. Tell us about that career move.
Yeah. So I was involved with that as an athlete at New Mexico State, and it had a big impact on me and, kind of growing me up from 18 to 22 years old. And so my wife and I decided to go do that. And the way that organization works is a little bit like the military. They ask you for your top 3 choices of where you want to go. So we were like Colorado Boulder, Colorado State, in Fort Collins, Colorado, and they were like, oh, that's all great. You're going to the University of Missouri in Columbia, Missouri. My wife, not a fan of geography, literally looked at me when we'd gotten the call saying, hey, we chose a place for you. And she's from New Mexico. And she goes, where's Missouri? And I'm like, honey, are you serious? You don't know where Missouri is? So I pulled out a map, an atlas. Of course, I had them readily available with my weird love of maps. And I go, honey, I'm like, it's right here. And I pointed and she goes, that looks cold. And I'm like, how can you tell from a map, a flat map, that it looks cold? So we were off to Columbia, Missouri, and series of events outside of my control, but we were the benefactors of it. I got to meet Coach Gary Pinkel. He had been on campus for a couple months from Toledo, had just taken the job, and went to his office, had a meeting with him, and he said, well, I'm looking for a chaplain for the football team. That's my first priority on any of this stuff, And I said, oh, cool. I'd love to talk to you about it. And he looked at me. I'm 24 years old, maybe.
Right.
He's got 5th year seniors that are my age on the team, probably, right?
Right.
And he said, you ever done anything like that? So we talked through my background, and he's like, well, come back in a couple months when spring football's over and I'm off the recruiting trail, and let's meet again. So we did. And it ended up working out. And so I worked with the coaching staff and the players, and then all the other sports teams at Mizzou as well for the next 4 years.
Yeah. What was your big learning in that experience?
I think just serving people, right? I mean, I remember one of my biggest experiences as junior quarterback, starting quarterback, local kid, All-American kid, was the quarterback for Mizzou, and he tore his ACL early in the season, and his season was over. And I remember, that happening. He gets carted off the field. He's in the locker room, and one of the trainers comes out and says, "Hey, he wants you." And I mean, I'm 2 games or 3 games into my tenure, and go in the locker room, and you're with a local kid. All his family's in the stands, and he's the starting quarterback, Big 12 football team, and his season's over. And the reality is, they had a redshirt freshman that was a stud, Brad Smith, that came on the scene, and he was redshirting that year. And so this starting quarterback ended up never getting on the field again because he lost his junior year due to the ACL. And then his senior year, the redshirt freshman is now playing, his first year of eligibility, and he takes the job, and that's that. And so this guy's career was over, right? He could have gone to he had a Stanford golf scholarship, and he chose to be quarterback, kind of hometown kid at Mizzou. So go in the locker room, and the guy's just devastated, right? I mean, sure. It's sports is such an amazing platform as far as you go from, like the old ABC commercial, the thrill of victory, the agony of defeat. In one play, your career can be over. Somebody gets in and takes your job, and you're just on the highest of highs and the lowest of lows at all times. And so I think, just again, I had to serve him in a way that wasn't fun. That didn't really what I envisioned.
Right.
But yeah, so probably my biggest learning is just serving the coaches, being there available for the players, whatever they need in the highs or the lows.
Yeah. So then you make a kind of a career pivot, and I think it looked like you go to Universal Tech Institute and in a sales rep role. Tell us about that switch.
Yeah, I had family that had worked for that organization, a nationwide school that's the biggest training school or provider of automotive and diesel technicians. 1/3 of every Mercedes-Benz technician in America went through UTI for schooling. So, I went to Houston, recruited inner city kids in Houston, Texas, to be, hey, college isn't the right fit for you. I'd go talk to senior classes. Sometimes high school principals just give me hey, we'll bring all 300 seniors into the cafeteria and you can talk for an hour and a half. Kind of motivational speaking and giving them options for life, realizing that they're not going to University of Houston, Rice, A&M, Texas, or even a junior college, probably locally, but they could get a trade in 1 year and go make a really good living and have an incredible career working for great companies, great dealerships. And so, again, I had family that worked for that company, so I knew of an opportunity there in Houston, took it, did that for a couple of years, then moved back to the Fort Worth area where I'm from and led, all over 14 states. I led teams that did this in all the high schools from Kentucky to Missouri, Iowa, Wyoming, and down to Texas.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You're obviously you know how to serve others. You have a great presence. You probably were great at that point. You're still in your, mid to late 20s, so you're relatable to high school kids. What was your role? I mean, your approach, to go into sales and recruit these young people to the Institute?
Yeah, very often I would go meet with these kids and their parents, because it's a big decision, and it wasn't inexpensive as a private school, wasn't inexpensive for 1 year of training. So I would go to trailer houses, I'd go to apartments. I walked into a lot of, single mom homes. I remember when I was again, leading teams doing this in a management role, we were in St. Louis. We were right off of downtown St. Louis. And I walked in with the recruiter that reported to me, and I'm doing a ride along with them. And it's not a great area off of downtown St. Louis that we're walking into. And I remember the dad was watching TV in the living room, and he wouldn't come into the meeting at the kitchen table. And the mom, we sat down, and no matter what, I went in to try to talk to the dad and say, sir, this is an important meeting. It's about your son's future. And he wouldn't come in. And so long day at work or what have you. But I remember the mom saying she took control of the meeting, and she looked at me and the recruiter and then looked at her son and said, I want you to tell these guys, and the closest campus to St. Louis is Chicago. I want you to tell these guys why you have to do this. And so we look at the kid, and just a month before that, his best friend was killed outside that house, his house, leaving his house late at night in a drive-by shooting. And, then I'm also looking at the recruiter going, hey, dude, it's going to be about 9:30 or 10 o'clock when we get out of here tonight. And we had to park 4 blocks away in the neighborhood. I'm looking at him going, anyway. But yeah, the mom was like, he's got to go. He has to make something of his life. He has to get out of this neighborhood. And so my biggest learning and takeaway was give people opportunities for a better life, to learn a skill and a trade people can never take away from them. And if they have the work ethic and dedication, they will always, in any city, small town or big city in America, be able to find a good job for a good wage and provide for their family and be productive members of society. So that's what we did. And it was often kids that they were on, this is kind of their last chance to go do something and make something of themselves.
Yeah. Did you have any, you're in again, sales role, which, as you and I believe, sales is about adding value to people. But yeah. Did you have any early mentors, whether they be people or books you read? Like, what drove your philosophy in terms of really approaching a new, occupation for you, right?
Yeah. So part of the story that, that ties into this is I taught school for 1 year that I shared, 8th grade American history, and coached. And then after that, we did have about a 9-month window before we moved to the University of Missouri or went to work with AIA at Mizzou. So in that 9-month window, I was like, well, I can't teach school because I'm not going to be able to get in the full year. So I've got to do something for 9 months to, make money and all of that. And so my father-in-law actually worked for UTI, and that's how I got into it. And he was local there in New Mexico and El Paso, Texas. And so he said, why don't you come work for me? And, I'll pay you as a contractor, 1099. And so I'm like, okay. And I made more money. I worked for him for about 6 months and ended up making more money in that venture with him than I did the full year teaching 8th grade and coaching. But what happened was he really mentored me in sales, because I would go in and with him in these, right on the border, El Paso, Texas, and Juarez, Mexico. And, these kids, again, this is their only shot. Their only shot to get out of El Paso or to get out of the barrios or the neighborhood. It's to go to Phoenix or go to Houston, one of those campuses, and learn a trade. And the amazing thing is he did that role for about 20 years. And he said, Scott, let me tell you something. Don't ever judge a book by its cover. He goes, you're going to walk into a house. He goes, I've walked into more situations where, and it was $100 to apply. They had to give you a check or cash or a money order from the store for $100. And this is 1990.
Yeah. So it's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money, a commitment just to apply to the school. And he's like, you go in and you think there's no way this family's going to be able to, they don't have $100 to their name, And he said, I've seen people, say, hey, I'm going to go sell this tomorrow. Can you come back tomorrow night and I'll have money for you? They sell something of value to their house or something they make. He said, I've seen people go to their neighbor next door and ask their neighbor, we got $80. We need a 20. Can you help my son go to school? He goes, I've seen them call the grandmother, and the grandmother drives over and pulls $100 out of her purse and says, I'll help. I'm going to help Johnny go to school and make something of himself or herself. So don't judge a book by its cover. Give everybody an opportunity. What that person makes of that opportunity is on them. But you have presented and given them a value proposition, an opportunity to make something of their life. And so, yeah, he was my mentor in sales early on.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. Yeah, it's amazing if you kind of go in with an open mind and, how can I help this person? And without any preconceived notions, it changes the whole dynamic. So you have a good run there. It looks like about 12 years. You did a little bit, you got into kind of organizational development and training. Is that when you went to Gonzaga because you got your master's in organizational development?
Yeah. So I was looking at executive MBA programs in Fort Worth. It's when I was in managing teams out of Fort Worth. But I wanted something that was more transferable, if you will, to life as well as business. MBAs are awesome, and the networking and relationships you build and what you learn about business through those. So I do have some regrets and wish I wish I'd have gotten an MBA, but I also have things that I believe the program at Gonzaga that I started researching programs, and I found this one at Gonzaga, and really the emphasis was organizational leadership and kind of a servant leadership track that they put you through. And so your writing, your research, all your reading and things are really on just servant leadership principles and great leaders throughout history in various fields that have impacted the world, impacted their organization, their communities through servant leadership. So I was like, man, that appeals to me on a lot of levels. And so I started that program when I was in sales management. 6 months into the program, most of it was distance. I was in Dallas, Fort Worth, but I had to go up to Spokane for one of the classes, was an intensive there on campus. But 6 months after that, this job pops up at my company in Scottsdale, at the home office in Scottsdale. And I was traveling all the time, had little kids, and my wife was like, hey, you ought to look into this opportunity because it probably isn't as much travel. And it sounds like it's up your alley. And it was sales training and leadership development for a UTI was a publicly traded company, about a $500 million company revenue at the time. And so I applied. And having started that program at Gonzaga and knowing I'd complete it in a couple of years of nights and weekends, the vice president of organizational development and the CHRO that had interviewed me for the job, that probably helped me get it, was like, oh, you've already started a path towards this. You're passionate about it and committed to it. And so, yeah, took the job, moved the family from Dallas, Fort Worth out to Scottsdale.
Yeah, that's great. I'm going to go back to your history roots, American history. Who is your favorite or top two favorite leaders in American history?
Without a doubt, Abraham Lincoln is one of them. In fact, in, classic book, all-time great business book, Good to Great, Jim Collins said that Abraham Lincoln was a level 5 leader and maybe one of the only, he probably didn't qualify, maybe hadn't researched all presidents to that point, but definitely he was one of very few level 5 leaders in the history of the presidency of the United States. So, right, an intense resolve for organizational success is what level 5, Good to Great. But for this, it was country success. It was country unity. Right. It was freeing the slaves. It was, keeping the union together. So he had an intense will for that and resolve, right? And of course, he'd overcome so many defeats in elections to even get to that point. But he also had genuine humility. And so he was like Abraham Lincoln, definitely a level 5 leader and one of the few probably presidents in history rose to that level of leadership as he defined it with his research and his team. I'd say the other one, there's so many, but I'd throw out Martin Luther King. I kind of put this out on LinkedIn a few weeks ago during Black History Month there in February. But to me, something that rang true in the 60s and we need as much or more today than we did in the 60s is judging a person by the content of their character, not by the outward appearance, their color, their race, ethnicity, gender, whatever, right? Don't judge a book by its cover, but by what's inside the book that really is the measure of a person. And so that just his speech rings true. It's one of my favorite all-time, kind of public speeches in American history, what it stood for, and how he delivered it and all of that. So I'll throw those two out there.
Yeah, no, I love that. I don't know if you've read Adam Grant's Give and Take, but there's a lot of Lincoln examples there, even some I had never heard of before, but how he always had the greater good in mind, and and he did crazy, what people would think is crazy, like, so it's phenomenal. And then a friend of mine just told me, I think Dale Carnegie wrote a book about Abraham Lincoln that's supposedly fantastic, but it's hard to get. Like, you have to know somebody from Dale Carnegie back in the day because they used to give him copies of the book, I guess. So,
Wow.
so
I'll have
yeah,
to look that up.
yeah. So you decide at some point while you're in Scottsdale to go to MindWire.
Yeah.
What was the kind of the transition there and the kind of the emphasis behind doing that?
Yes. UTI had really high and great times, but was in a pretty rough season, and they were asking me to make a lot of cuts to my division. I had moved on from org development and training and was overseeing advanced training and B2B relationships with BMW and Mercedes and Ford and General Motors and a lot of different OEMs in the automotive and diesel industry. And so they were asking me and everyone else across the company to make very serious cuts. And so it was a point, kind of a crisis of leadership point for me to think about all the people I'd hired and trained and division we'd built and all the good that was happening. And because the company was really struggling in other areas, not our division was profitable, but in other areas it was contracting. And so I just had a big decision to make. Do I want to stay after walking a lot of people out, helping them pack up their office in boxes, load it in their cars and saying goodbye? And do I want to go back up to my office at corporate? And at the same time that I was kind of in that decision process, knowing that this reduction in force was coming down the pike soon, some guys that I had worked with at UTI, head of HR, was launching a human capital firm. And so when I'm going through this, then I get approached by a couple other folks that I'd worked with that said, hey, we're about to launch a new company. Why don't you come help us get that launched? And so much to the dismay of my wife, as you can imagine, because her dad had worked at the company for so long. Since she was 7 or 8 years old, UTI had in some way put food on her table, either through me or through her dad. So I come home and I go, I think I want to leave UTI amidst all that's going on. It's a great place, but it's just, I'm struggling and I have this other opportunity. She's like, oh, what's the name of the company? I go, they don't have a name yet. How much are they going to pay you? I'm like, no, it's 100% commission. I've got to go build a clientele. I'm not getting paid anything. What's the medical benefit? I go, they don't have any benefits. We have to go buy our own, on the open market. And she just kind of sat there looking at me like, you've been here 12 years. You've been promoted 3 times. Are you sure that you want to do this? Because I'm not sure.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Exec HQ, a C-suite fractional firm providing elite executives for your business. If you're having challenges taking your business to the next level, if you want to augment your leadership team, or prepare your company for increased growth, profitability, and an eventual successful exit, we have seasoned executives from every C-suite position ensuring a perfect fit for your needs and the dynamics of your industry. You will work with senior leaders who like to roll up their sleeves while checking their egos at the door. They can help your business in specific services such as strategic planning, executive leadership coaching, financial management, corporate governance, marketing, sales management, and many other advisory solutions vital to your business success. That's exechq.com. To learn more, go to exechq.com or email Jeff Palacio at jeff.palacio@exechq.com.
And so over the course of the next couple of weeks, I made that decision and left a salary and stock and bonuses and 12-year career at that company. And we went and started a human capital firm with no clients, no name, no benefits.
Wow. And how old were you approximately when you made this change?
Yeah, so that was 7 years ago. So I'm 48 now, I was 41.
Yeah, I can understand why your wife would be a little hesitant about that.
Well, like we have kids in private school, son's about to turn 16 and add car insurance.
Needs a car.
It's a car. She's just looking at all these things going, you're sure, but I'm not. So it was some fun conversations over this couple of weeks.
Yeah. What was your big learning there? Because I mean, you're going from kind of a, I don't know how many years UTI was in business, but it sounds like a long time since your father-in-law,
Yeah.
worked there. And you go to a startup, it was like, oh, wow. Like a month in, you're going, oh, I didn't know this.
Yeah. So the big learning was faith is very important to me. And I believe everything happens for a reason. I believe that, whether people, it's like, hey, the universe is going to pay you back if you pay it forward and all of that, or it's God or a deity. And for me, it was like, go do the right things with people, treat them right, be honest, give them opportunities. If it's something you truly believe in and that's impacted you, the tools that we were going to use as a human capital firm, I'd used at UTI and been trained on. I'd seen the impact that it could make with leaders and teams and an organization. So it's something I really believed in that could make a difference. And, to me, if you go sell something that you believe in, that's personally impacted you and your life, and you've seen it impact others, then it's a fairly easy sell. Now, that said, it took 4 or 5 months to get my first client. And other people, there were 6 of us that started the company, and everybody else probably at that point had already gotten a client or 2. And so I'm going, is this thing actually going to come to fruition and happen? And so there was some testing for sure. But I learned a lot of this from my dad, who was 48 years at the same company. And then my father-in-law that taught me a lot about sales, but just, go to work every day, get up early and put your head down, do what's right, treat people right, be honest, and try to help people and help companies. And it panned out. It started to got my first client, and then next and next and next, and it just started to go really well.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, I know MindWire had a lot to do with Predictive Index. Was that your first exposure to Predictive Index, or did you use it at UTI?
Yeah. So when I got the job and moved from Dallas to Phoenix to Scottsdale, the home office, they trained me on PI. They just started using it as an organization. So our whole team in organizational development and training, there were 12 of us, went and got certified and trained on that tool to come back and work with managers and their teams and talent acquisition and apply those tools and principles inside UTI. So I got to use that for 6 years at UTI before I went out and launched MindWire.
Yeah, so interesting. So to help the listeners, Predictive Index is an assessment tool, but they may be more familiar with Myers-Briggs or Colby Index or
Right.
Clifton Strength Finders, Working Genius, Enneagram, whatever. But kind of explain why Predictive Index and why you think it's so powerful.
Yeah, it's a crowded field for sure. So Predictive Index, I'll do a quick summary but Arnold Daniels is the founder, and he flew missions in the Army Air Corps in World War II European theater. It was part of a bomber team, and his team had tremendous success with all these sorties and how they were handling, while other teams were struggling and people were really struggling with the mission. Very serious, obviously, you're dropping bombs on the enemy and all of that. And so the Army Air Corps, prior to being called the Air Force, started to utilize behavioral science. Had gotten popular. Disc Myers-Briggs were already invented and out and getting some traction by then in the 40s. But he got exposed to that, and they tested his team and other teams in the Army Air Corps to say, is there something about how a person is genetically wired that is going to help them in decision-making, in communication, in teamwork, all of that is very important. Today, the B-2 bombers and my brother's a retired F-16 squadron commander in the Air Force. And so I know quite a bit about the Air Force through his lens and all his buddies and stuff. But out of Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, those B-2s will take off with 2 pilots. They get refueled in the air. They're, every pilot, everything's computerized. But back in World War II, it's a whole team on this bomber that's going in, and then so they started to study team dynamics and how people were wired. And he was from Boston. When the war ended in 1945, he went back and started enrolled in classes at Harvard in behavioral science. And so he studied behavioral science, and over the next decade, built and developed a behavioral assessment and started to test it out on companies in and around Boston. And so in 1955, PI launched as a tool on the market to help organizations. And so that's kind of the history background. The differentiators with Predictive Index, I think, is number one, how it's built. It's a free choice methodology. There's no questions. Your eyes roll across words. And if you believe those words describe how you really are or what others expect out of you, then you select the word. And if they don't, then you move on. You can choose as few or as many words as you want. It takes about 6 minutes to complete. You can do it on your iPhone. And all of a sudden, because the algorithm and 50 million or so people that have taken it and all the data that gets crunched immediately, in 30 seconds, you have a 2-page summary hit your email. And people, I mean, I assessed one of my brother's former Air Force buddies, F-16 pilots, now a Southwest Airlines captain. And he's like, Scott, I took this thing in 5 minutes on my phone and thought there would be 20 screens. There were only 2 screens or slides with these words. It was over in 5 minutes. And I'm like, what is this going to tell me about anything? Like, this is the craziest thing. And he goes, then I got the summary and read it. And then my wife read it. And he's like, it's crazy. It's crazy how accurate it is in describing. It's a behavioral, not personality test. I mean, it's in the genre, but you call it a workplace behavior assessment because it measures a person's innate drives. Those drives produce motivations, and those motivations surface in the workplace as a behavior. And so, one, it's very short. 2, the way it is conducted. 3, it's got a cognitive learning agility. So just like the NFL uses the Wonderlic assessment and they hang their hat on it. Now, it didn't work great this past year at the Combine for CJ Stroud, who did incredible with the Texans this last year. I think maybe he was Rookie of the Year. He didn't do so well on the Wonderlic, but the reality is Ryan Fitzpatrick and Tom Brady and Peyton Manning and a lot of other people that are like offensive coordinators on the field calling audibles and calling their own plays at many points of the game is because they have incredibly fast learning agility. They can recall what they've learned and trained and watched in films. They can recall things years back from college or whatever. And in the pressure-packed moment, when they only have 3 seconds to make a decision, they pull out often, not always, but often a good decision. And it works out to get a first down or a touchdown. So the NFL uses cognitive learning agility. PI uses a very similar science, but slightly different cognitive test. And it's incredible how it maps to success in sales, how it maps to success in leadership and promoting. So you don't over promote people beyond what their capability or learning speed, learning style can handle in complex roles. So PI's got the behavioral, Myers-Briggs DISC, Enneagram, all of that, but it also has a learning agility assessment that when paired together gives you an incredible amount of data and insight into people, and it's valid for hiring. All of those other tools will say we're not valid for hiring. Predictive Index is valid for hiring with the EEOC. It's valid for hiring in Europe, very popular in Europe. And so use it to hire and assess candidates and help put people in the right seats in the company.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I've taken a lot of them. I haven't taken Working Genius. I'm pretty sure I have not taken PI, but could have been a long time ago. I know like Clifton Strength Finders can change over time. So I've taken it 3 times and kind of my top 5 have morphed a little bit. I mean, they still stay in the top 10, but my top 5 have morphed. Is it a PI once you get it? Does it stay or do you need to take it periodically?
It's a great question. So they've done longitudinal studies with control groups over a decade or longer with people taking it the first time and then taking it again 10 years later and studied that science. Another thing that makes PI really different is there's 17 reference patterns. There's captain, there's analyzer, there's adapter, there's maverick, there's all these different profiles. And what they would say and what the science would say is this stuff's innate and locked in when you're 6 or 7 years old. And so can there be nuance change? Yes. Can you go from they don't use animals. A lot of assessments use animals, right? But if they did, you might call a maverick a tiger and you might call an operator a penguin. And can you go from being a tiger to a penguin in the animal kingdom? No. Right. And so can you grow and mature, and can you learn through self-awareness and emotional intelligence and interpersonal savvy, how to press on the gas in areas and hit the brakes in others? And can you do that for a meeting? Can you do it for an interview? Can you do it for a week or a month in a new position? Sure. Can you do that over the long term and be great at it and engaged and love your job and love your life and not have dark Sundays? No. And PI, by the way, measures two things. It measures your hardwired, natural, genetic, this is who you are, your strengths, your motivations. And then it also takes a snapshot in time when you take it at that moment. What is expected out of you in your current work environment by your current bosses and your current team? What's expected? How are you having to change your stripes, if you will, because of the current role or your current boss or your current team? The expectations they have out of you with behavior and productivity at work, if it's different significantly than how you're naturally wired, you're going to adjust. And I had bosses like that. I had bosses that I knew that wanted small talk and how's the family. And other bosses are like, I don't care about that. I want to talk about your numbers, and I want to know where you are and what you're doing about it to fix it if you're not where you are.
Right.
So I would adjust to their leadership style.
Yeah.
But that wasn't my natural wiring. It's how I knew I needed to adjust to them.
So you spend, look like about 3.5 years at MindWire, and then you make a switch to another startup in the EdTech industry. What was the emphasis for that change?
Yeah, some guys I'd known for a long time, 25 years, met them when I was in college, had started up a company in Austin. It started in Austin, then they moved it to Boulder area, Colorado. And it was digital portfolios for everything from kindergarten to 12th grade, and then college, University of Tennessee dental program, and used these digital portfolios for students to showcase their work and to do presentations and all of that. So across all grade levels, and even medical schools in India use the tool. So they'd recruited me for a long time to come to work for them. And for years, in fact, the whole time I was at MindWire, every year or so, this guy that I'd known for 25 years, Eric, would call me. What are you doing? How's it going? Why don't you come join us? And I, no, for 3.5 years. And then just some circumstances changed. And of course, their offer got better. It kept, and just some things happened. I was like, but the big thing that changed was, and I'm back in the same space now that I was at MindWire, but in the consulting world, the thing that I loved the most was getting in and training leaders and spending time with executives and talking through teams and leadership and people and all of that. And so I kind of had the bug to, okay, I want to go back and be in one company, build my team, lead my team and help lead the company. And the opportunity they were talking about was something we did go, it was global. It was, we did some amazing things, users in over 100 countries across the world. And, but it became clear throughout my time there that the investor funded startup, that we just want to get to the point that it's going to sell, and then we're going to sell it when it's the right time. And so this past summer was that point. And so it became clear, and they entered into the process of selling to another entity, to a competitor actually out of Europe. And so it became clear that it was time to go do something else, that road was going to end. But Bulb's a great product, and glad that it is now sold, and will carry on and even be more global probably than what it's been.
So that happens at Bulb, and now you're you start a company, Wake Effect. I love the human capital advisory firm, but why start a company versus getting another, other type of gig, which is less, strenuous, especially for your wife, probably.
That's correct. Yeah. So we had to have that conversation again about what's the name of it. I don't have one. Well, how are the benefits? We don't have any. Right. So we had to go back through that. The fact that she stayed, we've been married 26 years later this year. And the fact that she stayed with me through that, what I put her through, I thought, we've built the muscle. We can do this again. Muscle memory. Plus we've built homes and redone a lot of homes. She's interior designer. And so that's also tests of marriage, certainly. Yeah, the big decision for me was, and I was open, like if the right opportunity had come along through my network and through headhunters and things to go land at a company, then, I'd go, burn the boats, the bridges, whatever, and go and plug into a company and give it my all. I, though, am going, okay, now I'm in my upper 40s and I'm forecasting, however many years of productive time I have left. And of course, my father-in-law is 83 and still farms every day and ranches every day. My dad retired at 76 after 48 years at a company. So I have no illusion of like, hey, at 59, I'm going to hit the beach and all of that.
Right.
That's not what I'm focused on. I'm focused on impact and legacy. And that's really where I came to the idea, and the name Wake Effect was from Henry Cloud's book, Integrity. In chapter 2, he talks about that every person leaves a wake behind them on every other human being that they interact with. And I've seen that done extremely well in companies, and I've seen that done extremely poorly in companies. And then when I was at MindWire, I had about 24 companies, from small nonprofits to global, Fortune 100 automotive company that I worked with. And so I've seen it across industry, doesn't matter. Leading people is hard. People are complex. Humans are, leadership would be easy if it wasn't for the people. And people don't leave companies, they leave leaders. We know all the cliche statements. And the reality is I've always desired to be a level 5 leader. And I don't want to call myself one, because you start calling yourself one, then maybe your humility isn't where it needs to be to rise to that level. I aspire to be that, right? I aspire to give credit out when there's success, organizational success, and look in the mirror for fault first when there's failure and struggle. And I'm like, you know what? I want to go impact leaders across industry. It doesn't matter. Nonprofits, for-profit, commercial real estate, automotive companies, whatever. I want to go work with leaders and give my time. I want to get up early and go to bed late and help people to be better leaders. And the coolest thing about anytime you teach or you train or you coach, if you are open to it, you often are the one that's more impacted than the people you're coaching and training and teaching. And so selfishly, I'm like, I'm still on this journey of my own leadership. So if I can go help leaders, great. But I'm going to grow through this process of constantly putting yourself out there and being vulnerable and honest and open and serving and working hard for something. And so I was like, yeah, Wake Effect. I want to help leaders and organizations improve their wake that they leave behind on every human that they hire, whether people are there 1 year or 25 years at that company, whether they're customers, brand new customer, or they utilize the tools and the practices and retain that customer forever. Improve your wake internally, externally. So yeah, that's where the vision came from.
So what is your process to work with clients?
I investigate where those clients are at. I've talked a lot with Corey and the amazing work he's doing around trust with his consulting practice, and the book that he wrote, I found very powerful. Similar way, though I don't have an assessment and haven't written a book like Corey. But the process, you go investigate a company, and if they go, hey, we're struggling with retention and attrition in these specific roles or across the board, we're struggling with engagement, right? Gallup, State of the American Workforce, 20% or 30% of the American workforce, and it's been about the same number since 2000 when they started doing the survey. 30% are engaged. 30% of American workforce is engaged. 50% is disengaged, and 20% is actively disengaged. Or they're the cancer on the team, or they actually want to see the demise of their leader or their team or their company. But 50% in the middle are disengaged. They got a pit in their stomach on Sunday nights when they go to work. And so we want to apply data and science that's available through PI. Kathleen is a lady, a teammate of mine, and she uses Enneagram and executive coaching. And so there's lots of great tools out there. But we use the tools to go in and diagnose and to get data. We, like doing an MRI before you do a surgery on someone's knee or shoulder, we want to go in and we want to get the data and start challenging leaders to make data-driven decisions for the good of their people, the good of their teams, the good of their organization. And so the process is, let's apply tools, let's glean the data and harness and measure what can be measured. about tricky humans. If we can hire better, we now have data that tells us how to speak their love language at work, how to motivate that person, because not everyone's motivated by the same thing. And in fact, you're leading people, and I know you've led a lot throughout your career, Jeff, at a lot of different companies. And sometimes you've been in that situation where you're coaching someone, or you got to confront someone and have an accountability conversation, and that the conversation's over, and you know that in many ways you were speaking English, but this person doesn't know a word of English and speaks Russian or speaks, Czechoslovak, whatever. They speak some different language than you. They really don't. They do speak English. The point is they're motivated by something completely different than what you're motivated by. And so getting them to act and move and come around to your idea, your new strategy, what you're asking of them to make a change, they're motivated by something different. So we use the tools, and you can talent map and do succession planning. And really, Predictive Index has done an incredible job of throughout the employee life cycle. They have different modules and tools now that help you make better decisions, lead people, get those people in the right position, and keep them. Hire the right people and keep them longer. And if companies are doing that, culture improves, engagement obviously improves, less dark Sunday nights for employees and leaders. People come in and perform better. They don't have to change their stripes. They don't have to be a duck out of water. They can play to their strengths. And like Marcus Buckingham, you're playing chess with people, not checkers. It takes years to learn how to be a chess champion. As a manager, leader, CEO, it takes years to become great with people. And so we take companies on that journey, starting with data, starting where they're at, whatever it is that they need to improve. We measure it, and we serve alongside them and help them improve it.
I think it's fantastic. As we've discussed on our first meeting prior to this, it's all about leadership and building great cultures. And, you're doing great work in it and have done that. And obviously Corey Shear also. Yeah. And any specific focus on the type of client, whether it's size, revenue, industry, or you're just really agnostic?
Yeah, not at all. I mean, just started in January, working with a startup company right now out of Albuquerque in Tennessee, working with a commercial real estate company. That company's in water treatment. They're a manufacturing company and build water treatment apparatus for companies, clean labs, clean water, all sorts of applications. Talking to a very large commercial utility construction company out of Denver. No, I'm not bound by industry or size of company. Talking to a network of churches out of Oklahoma that have 100 staff people and want to utilize the tools to hire staff people better. Industry agnostic, because people all have challenges and motivations, and the people are the same, if you will, no matter what industry they're in. Yeah, looking for companies that want to be people-centered, want to be people, purpose, profit type companies, want to invest in tools, invest in their people, and not treat people like cogs in a wheel that are disposable, but that they're their most valuable asset. And so they want to improve the way they treat, lead, develop their people. That's the kind of companies we look for.
Scott, as you know, I love to help two groups of people with leaders like yourself advice. So the first group is, hey, you come out of college, you have really no clue how to get a job. So what advice would you have for them as they go about their first professional job out of college and begin their career?
Yeah, I would say be intentional about the culture and the leadership of the company where they're applying. Don't just take a job. And I know that's easy to say. You get a car payment, you get student loans, you got to pay rent. There's a lot of things that you're facing, and so there's a lot of pressure coming out of college to get a job and start making money. So I totally get that. But be intentional as much as possible about when you're interviewing with a hiring manager, someone in talent acquisition, or a panel interview. Be intentional about digging in and really trying to discover and doing research prior to on that company's culture. If you're interviewing with your direct hiring manager, which is often the case, be transparent and open with them. I mean, I tell people, give people PI all the time, individuals go, yeah, here, take this if you're looking for a job, and then hand it to talent acquisition folks or a hiring manager and say, this is me. These are my strengths, how I'm hardwired. Here's my motivations. And as much as you can, try to find a great fit starting out where you're a culture fit, you're working for a great leader that's going to develop you. Be picky if you can afford to be picky in taking that first job. Millennials and Gen Z, but millennials more than Gen Z. Of course, we don't have enough data yet on Gen Z, but millennials are the most transient demographic generation. They'll go to companies and get 2 years, whatever, and they're off to the next job, off to the next job, off to the next job. You see it in resumes all the time. And I'm not judging that. There's a lot of reasons for that. What I am saying is, if you can, dig in and make that interview experience. You interview them as much as possible versus them interviewing you.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and what I tell recent college graduates, it's similar to what you just said. Like, since they don't have any professional experience, basically, they could have an internship. You're 99.9999% of the time, you're going to get the question, what's your biggest strength or strengths? And what's your biggest weakness? So just prepare for those two questions. And it's great if you go through an assessment like PEI or Strength Finder or whatever it is, because you have the answer.
That's right.
And it's, it's verifiable, right? So, and you're much more endearing to that company if they use the assessment that you talk about too. So that it'll make their eyes light up a little bit more during the interview. But well, that second group is the people that begin their kind of, I'll say, the official leadership journey. Everybody can be a leader, whether you're responsible for a team or not. But once they get that promotion and now are responsible for people and a team of people, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, so I would give them the advice of the platinum rule. So lead others as they need to be led. Golden rule: treat others as you want to be treated. That doesn't work in leadership. In leadership, it's about those people and knowing your people. You can use tools like StrengthsFinder, PI, Enneagram, and many others to help you get a jump start on knowing your people better and them knowing you. Great. But spend the time and invest the time. It has become harder with COVID, with remote working. You don't see people around the office or go to happy hour or whatever as much. And so there's challenges there. It's more challenging, I think, to really get to know what makes a person tick, what motivates them, how to speak their language. But I would say do that. Put others before yourself. And the crazy thing is that you always win when you do that. So put others first. We before me, or them before me, or you before me. And as there's no manual. There's lots of great leadership books, but there's no true manual. Your first biggest jump in your entire career is first time leading others.
Right.
You've gone from individual contributor to leader. And so invest in your people, get to know them, spend the time, serve them, never ask them to do something that you wouldn't do or that you aren't doing yourself, and offer help. That just creates great accountability, transparency, authenticity, trust, all of that if you follow those things.
Scott, you've been a great guest. I'm so grateful you reached out to me on LinkedIn. We scheduled a meeting, a Zoom call, and here we are. So thank you so much for your sharing your great career journey and your leadership advice.
Well, Jeff, thanks for what you're doing with the Corporate Couch and the podcast and inviting me on to it. It's been an honor, and I appreciate the time today with you.
I really enjoyed talking to Scott. He reached out to me on LinkedIn. We have some mutual connections. He's our first guest that lives in New Mexico, so that was cool. But yeah, he reached out to me. We had a Zoom call, and then got him on the podcast. But really, just he had some great stories, and I love the one that he was dating his now wife. And his now father-in-law has a ranch and still does. And he was this frat guy a little bit, so he goes to the ranch and they're going to put him to work. And he's in there with his probably, Izod polo or Ralph Lauren polo and designer jeans. And then they have him, he was a big guy, he threw the shot put and discus at New Mexico State.
Never ridden a horse before, or
never,
like
yeah.
that?
So he had problems riding the horse, but they respected him because he basically was power cleaning 400-pound calves in his designer
He
jeans.
could take
so
down that calf.
They didn't give a shit what he was wearing. They respected the guy's strength. So and he reminded me of a couple things. The platinum rule, so the golden rule is, treat others like you'd like to be treated yourself. But the platinum rule is, treat others as they want to be treated. So it's kind of that higher. And so he reminded me of that, and, talking about Jim Collins' great book, Good to Great, and Level 5 leadership, and, where you're ambitious for the company, not, you're not yourself in terms of, personal success, but it's basically a combination of humility with a strong drive to succeed for the greater good of the organization. So you remind me of all those different things, and just a very interesting career, and I really enjoyed talking to him.
It was interesting. One of the very first things that he had that he talked about, one of his first jobs, I wanted to zero in on just a little bit, and that was being the chaplain for the Missouri Tigers football team, and which I thought was kind of interesting because he goes in to talk to Gary Pinkel, who had just been hired by Mizzou. And one of the things that Coach Pinkel said was, he said, well, one of the first things I've got to do is hire a chaplain for the team. And I never thought of it quite like that. It's like, that's the first thing you do, But it really raised my respect for Coach Pinkel. I mean, I already had it anyway, but it raised, because here he is. Of course, the thing that he needs to do is to win games, and he was taking over essentially a losing proposition at the time. But the first thing that he was interested in was the spiritual and the emotional life of these kids, because these kids, when they're playing college football, they're 19 to 22 years old. They are not NFL players making $5 million a year. They're literally just kids. And he was really interested in the spiritual and the emotional life of these kids. And I thought that was great. And it was interesting that Scott could be a part of that for a few years.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I took out of it, I love assessments, and I was not that familiar with Predictive Index, and I actually did take it. I'm a collaborator. That's whatever that means. But I love that he went back to school and he, debated on the MBA, and then he decided to get. Gonzaga had this program in organizational servant leadership, basically, and he really immersed himself in that. I think it's a phenomenal move in terms of what he did, because it taught him a lot of different things. And he's really an expert in his, company Wake Effect. I mean, I think that he'll do great things for a lot of different companies in terms of his approach.
He will, because he's been all over the place before, so he can go into a company as a consultant, and no matter what they throw at him, he will have experienced it at some time and have a solution for it.
And the other good thing about him too, no matter how big that client is in terms of their size, he can probably power clean.
That's right.
And turn them upside down. So.
He can take them down.
Joe, what leadership advice would you want to impart on our great listeners today?
Today we're going to that great philosopher named Betty White. And Betty said this one time. She said, "My mother always used to say that the older you get, the better you get, unless you're a banana."
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Corporate Couch. If you enjoy the podcast, I would love for you to take 2 minutes out of your day to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Please join me next week to learn from another great leader sharing their professional journey and insights.